Okay, am I good to go?
Yes, sorry about that.
Good evening, all. This is this year's 2022 update of the state of Black Pasadena. It's going to be full of information and learning this evening. I'd like to thank our sponsors, the Alpha Kappa Psi, the Pasadena Altadena Links Ivy Foundation, Altadena Pasadena chapter of the Links Incorporated, Pasadena branch of the NAACP, the Altadena branch of the NAACP, Women in Leadership, Vital Voices, WIN, Women in the NAACP, and the Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority. Thank you all, and last but not least, Westcom Foundation. So for now, I'm going to open up with some facts about Pasadena. And we're going to be talking about living in the city of roses, Pasadena, California. These information that's here before you compares Pasadena to the state of California. Pasadena is currently growing at a rate of 9% annually. The average household income in Pasadena is $118,418. The poverty rate in the city is 14.46%. The median house value in Pasadena is above the state average. The median house value is $1,050,500. The average age of homes here in Pasadena is above the state average. Unemployment is significantly lower than the state average. The Black population in Pasadena is above the state average. The median age of Pasadena is 38.6 years. The median age for African Americans in Pasadena is 41 years. The March 2019 cost of living index in Pasadena was 146.2. It's very high. It costs a lot to live in Pasadena. The United States average is 100. And the percentage of the population with a bachelor's degree or higher is significantly above state average. Now I'd like to move on to the pro show to Patrice.
Good evening, and thank you so much for joining us. We're going to talk a little bit more in depth about the population of Pasadena and specifically its Black population. As you can see from the years 2000 to 2020, there have been growth in the overall population of the city of Pasadena, going from approximately 133,000, almost 134,000 people, up to 137,000. Then in 2015, going to 139,000, and then continuing to climb in 2020 up to just over 141,000. However, while the population of the city overall is growing, the population of Black people in Pasadena tends to decline, which is unfortunate. We saw the Black population in 2000 go from 19,354 people down to 14,650 in 2010. So in that 10-year period, we lost a significant amount of people in the city. That was a 24% population decline. From 2010 until now, there has still been a little bit of a steady decline, but it's definitely more stable and leveling off. We are hopeful that the information that we share this evening will allow you, your friends, and your network to be able to have tools to think about when you are making decisions about where you settle, how you settle, and where you make your home, that you will consider staying in Pasadena and making sure that this continues to be home for Black folks and that we have a strong presence here. Next slide, please. As Alan was saying earlier, it is expensive to live here, but not completely unattainable or unaffordable. Overall, the cost of housing is higher than the national average. We're at 184% higher than the national average, and our utility prices are also a little bit higher. If you think about it, because of the weather, we are definitely looking to have higher costs related to kind of heating and cooling. We do enjoy warm days in the spring and summer for the most part and throughout the year, but we do have those temperatures dip down at night. So in the effort of trying to keep warm, we do have some ebbs and flows in sort of the utility costs. So that is going to be a little bit higher here than other places in the nation. Also looking at transportation, because Pasadena, Southern California, and the greater LA region is definitely car country. People are typically driving more, and so you're going to pay a little bit more for gas and also public transit. Our public transit system has a relatively moderate ridership, so there's not the opportunity to have a significant fare generation from revenue from bus fares. So the cost to ride individuals is going to be a little bit higher, but we do have a growing transit infrastructure that's continuing to be built out. You're seeing more rail options, more bus options, more sort of mini transit options like the Metro micro system that's now in Pasadena, the bike lanes that are being available. So they're trying to find ways to sort of move people around in different ways to help sort of alleviate that cost of transit and other things that are associated with living here. Next slide, please. The median age in California is 37. The median age of people in Pasadena is 38.6 years old. But looking at the median age of Black people in Pasadena, it is 41. So overall, the median age of Black residents in the city of Pasadena is older than the state's average, and also for the overall average of the age of the city. But what that means is that there are not as many young people who live in Pasadena, not as many young families who live in Pasadena, not as many young children who are living here in Pasadena, which is driving that median age up. So what our hope is that this information will help our young professionals, our young residents find ways to establish career paths, establish educational pathways, establish training pathways that will lead to the acquisition of good paying jobs that will provide a high quality of life and allow us to continue to grow the age of people who are living in Pasadena, especially Black folks, and also bring that median age down just a little bit. In contrast, on the continent of Africa, the median age is like 15.7 years old. So that has to do with there being a lot more children, but also the life expectancy not being as high as our life expectancy is here. But we want to make sure that we're still being able to bring in younger residents to the city. Next slide. And then we're looking at the population of Black Pasadena by age and sex. What we are seeing is that the median age is certainly kind of in that, 45 to 60 year range in terms of the largest bands of residents on the male and the female side. We're also hopeful that, again, speaking to being able to have Pasadena be a place where we're growing our younger residents, we're looking forward to being able to find ways to provide you with tools and information so we can bring that age down so that we can see longevity in the residents of Black Pasadena. The median age for males is 39 years old, and the median age for females is 43 years old. That 17 and under, which is our young people, is about 20% of the Black population here in Pasadena. So we're hopeful that we'll see a greater trend in young people who are having families and settling so that we continue to see future of Black Pasadena residents being able to be long and significant as it has been to date. Next slide. With that, want to turn it over to Danny to talk more in depth about income. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrice. And I would ask that anyone who isn't speaking to please mute your line so there's no background noise. So I'm going to speak about income and give a bit of context and background to the income characteristics of the Black population of Pasadena. First, we start with median household income, and we see that Pasadena 2019 median household income is higher than the US median household income by about 20% or so. And you can see on the chart that in those higher income brackets, Pasadena's levels in orange skew higher than the overall United States. When we look at various measures of how Black wealth or household income compares to that of whites, we see a consistent, unfortunate pattern where it's much below, whether we look at net wealth, median worth, or average liquid retirement savings. And when it comes to net wealth and median worth, much of that disparity or that difference can be traced to housing ownership or home ownership. And we will get more into that later when Elise speaks about housing, but we're just right now laying the groundwork for that and looking at these differences, and they have consequences as we will discuss in further detail. When we look at the household income of Pasadena residents, we see how it skews into the higher income brackets, particularly above $100,000 annual household income. And that has ramifications about the ability to afford housing and what drives up those housing prices, as Pasadena has quite a few higher middle to upper income residents. Next, we look at the distribution of household income amongst Black residents in Pasadena. And what we see here, there's a couple of key points or takeaways, and that is a significant percentage of Black residents of Pasadena are earning significant incomes. And you see that on both charts appearing before you. But it's also important to note that that's not true for all Pasadena Black residents. And it's also very important to note that, as Patrice was discussing earlier, the decrease in the Black population in Pasadena, much of that can be traced to people leaving because they could not afford to continue to live in Pasadena, even if they were born and raised in Pasadena. Sorry about that, a little bit of technical challenge. So here we look at median household income and see how the Pasadena Black median income compares to California or statewide, Los Angeles County, and Pasadena. And on all accounts or all measures, the Pasadena Black median household income, while significant and substantial, is lower than statewide, countywide, and citywide in Pasadena. One quick note as you look at the chart, the American Indian or Native American median household income seems to be quite high and seems skewed. And to put that in quick context, that number reflects the fact that there is a very, very small Native American population in Pasadena, 300 to 400 people. So a base that small can easily be skewed by a couple of outliers. And there's some additional charts, a little bit of technical difficulty for that, I apologize, but you see some additional indication about household income. Next, we look at the overall US poverty rate. And it's important to note on this chart, this is teeing up the next slide that you will see. And you see how the federal poverty guidelines are determined based on family size from 1 to 8, and how it goes from 13,600 for a family size of 1 all the way up to family size of 8, $46,630 annual income determines poverty level. Quick thing to note here is that is a nationwide figure for the 48 contiguous states and Washington, D.C. That doesn't reflect, it's not adjusted for higher cost of living places like Pasadena. We see here the poverty rate in Pasadena by ethnic group or race. And we see that for the Black population in Pasadena, the poverty rate is lower than the national poverty rate. But again, we have to be mindful that that poverty rate is calculated based on those national poverty guidelines. So someone making a certain level of income in Pasadena, that money doesn't go as far as it would in other regions of the country or the overall average nationwide. Next, we look at what are the respective shares of poverty in Pasadena. And we see, as highlighted by the arrow, that the Black population has a lower than proportionate percentage of those in poverty. 7% of those in poverty compared to 8.77% of the overall population. So contrary to what maybe many of the common myths currently and historically, the Black population is not disproportionately reflected in the poverty population. Next, we shift to housing, and Elise Mallory will do like the old 60s song by Aaron Neville and tell it like it is.
Thank you, Danny, and good evening, everyone. Can you please go to the next slide? Okay, so we're going to look at housing in Pasadena from a variety of different perspectives over the next few minutes. The first thing here that I want to highlight is this is the value of housing in Pasadena. And what you will note here is that most of the housing is over $600,000. And when you really start breaking it down, the majority of the properties in Pasadena are now $1 million or greater. And you look at that greater than $1 million, that is on the right, that is your largest number. So that is where we're looking at the value. This is not looking at anything that has been sold at this point. We're just saying, what is the value distribution? And it does skew heavily in a high cost area. Next slide, please. So one thing that we talked about in one of the earlier slides is Pasadena housing is 184% higher than the nation average. And that was something we just looked at on the previous slide. Now this slide, we do start to get into what's actually selling in Pasadena. And the median home value for houses that are selling is at $1,080,000. And this number is up from when we did this exercise last year and took a look at it during the State of Black Pasadena home ownership. That number at that time was $1,050,000, and now it's gone up to $1,080,000, 1.1 million. As we found numbers in that range. So this is representing an ongoing increase in the percentage of the house value year over year. So if you're in the market and you own property, this is great. But if you're trying to get into the market, pricing is only going up and it's getting harder for you to make that leap. So when you go back and say about over a 10-year period from 2010 to 2022, you're looking at over a 70% increase in the value in the cost to get into home ownership. Now, at the same time, when we look at it from a perspective of the home value, we then also have to look at now what's really selling. What's selling is in this range of 616,924. Dan, keep a click on the mouse, please. What you'll see is that the majority there is 36.6%. So the majority of what is selling is actually falling in the range that is under $1 million, still quite expensive, but it is in this lower range. Can you go to the next slide, please? Now, what we were also curious about is what the change is. One of our ongoing goals is to look at the changes from kind of like a census perspective, 2000, 2010, 2020. Well, we kind of did some of that. We actually looked at housing in 2000 to 2019. And what you'll see there in 2000, the median home price was $268,000. By 2019, it was $889,000. That's a 332% change. And when you look at 2019 to 2022, click on the mouse, please. What you'll see is that's another 24% change. So the cost, again, of housing is only continuing to go up. as it goes up, if you're in the market, that's equity, that's good for you. If you're trying to get into the market, the dream is slowly getting harder to achieve. Now, another thing we did was we took a look at the type of housing. So you've got everything from detached homes, single homes, to townhouses, multi-dwelling units. The majority of what is being built in Pasadena at this time is in that multi-dwelling unit area. And based on the previous slide where we were looking at the majority of the price points, most of what is selling in Pasadena is in the multi-dwelling unit area. Next slide, please. So when we look at these dollars, they're high. And so we have to say, well, what does it take to achieve this type of a home? And so we did find information from a salary perspective. And what we found was around Los Angeles. And if we were to look at a home at with interest rate at 3.15 on a 30-year mortgage at $708,000, that mortgage would then be $2,849 per month, fully in with property taxes and insurance. And so the salary needed to support that would be around $122,000. So that's a number I'm going to ask you to keep in your mind: the $122,000 for the salary, and then the $2,849 for the mortgage. Next slide, please. So as we really start looking at breaking down Pasadena and what do income levels look like, on the west side of Pasadena, we are finding the higher incomes, and on the east side of Pasadena, and then as we look in the areas closer to San Marino. Right here in the middle and around the northwest Pasadena area, that's where we are looking at incomes in the $24,000 to $70,000 range. Next slide, please. So the next thing that we wanted to really understand is, how does that look from a Black perspective? So we looked to the data that the city pulled and it packaged recently with the redistricting effort that took place in Pasadena at the end of 2021. And what you'll note on the left side is all the different ethnicities. And then you go across the top, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, those are the different district areas. And what we pulled out, where I'm highlighting, is Councilmember Tyrone Hampton for District 1 and Councilmember John Kennedy for District 3. Now, what I'm going to ask you to take a look at here is, notice the Black population in each one of these districts is 17.6% and 12.7% respectively. Now, as we look at the white population and the Latino population, they substantially outweigh the Black population. So one thing that we always have to keep in mind as we work with our council members that look like us is we always have to keep in mind that they represent the holistic community. At the same time, when you look below at the voting age population, you see under District 1, 18.9%, and number 3 in District 3, 12.6%. That full voting population needs to come out, needs to vote, needs to make sure their voice is heard, needs to carry weight. Because when you look at the numbers overall, keep in mind, Black population in Pasadena, 8.77%. Voting population in these areas, it is higher. This is where we are. But we are still a small number within the overall picture. So the full voting population needs to be out there, making sure voices are heard. So we have people in office in the room making decisions that look like us and continue to represent our community. Next slide, please. Other things that we did take a look at is the race and ethnicity by the tract in Pasadena. What you'll notice in the upper left corner where you see the arrow pointing to Black, from a Black perspective, you're going to find more Black Pasadena living in that northwest Pasadena area. And please note that although that area is showing as red, that it's still only about 15% of the overall population. And the other areas Blacks do live in, but not in as strong of a, not as big of an impact within those areas. Now, we also took a look at it from a white perspective, Asian perspective, and Hispanic perspective. And what I want to draw your attention to is right under the Black slide, we have the Hispanic slide. And please notice that that is, again, it ties directly to the previous slide on the percentage of population, where you have Northwest Pasadena sitting here in the red, and how heavily populated that is with Hispanics. And this is where you're looking at, this is where you have Councilmember Hampton and Councilmember Kennedy coming into play. Next slide, please. So another area from a housing perspective that we have to take a look at is being a renter versus being owner occupied. And what you'll note is that married tends to be higher from an owner occupied. You have two incomes coming into the house. It makes it better, easier to be able to support it. But overall, the owner occupied population in Pasadena is around 42%. Can you, next slide, please. Now, remember in the earlier, we looked at what the mortgage would be on a 708,000 property. Remember, we saw 2849. Last year, we took a look at the rental, and with the slide on the right was January 2011 to December 2020. And there was only like about a $200 per month change. But I was listening to the news this morning, and it was talking about how expensive rent has gotten over the last year. And I took a look. Pasadena rent has gone up to the average of $2,774 per month. That is an increase of $421 per month from on a year-over-year basis. And if you look at it going back over 10 years, that's going to be $600 per month or $7,200 per year. And if you look at the bottom part of the slide, what you see is this comes again from our redistricting information. You'll see that the majority of the rental units are running along that Colorado corridor. Bottom line is you're looking at about $150 difference, $125 difference to have a mortgage. That's where you're going to have equity, build wealth, versus paying somebody else's mortgage where they're building equity and building wealth. So we really have to think about how we can bend this curve and how more people can actually get into the market. Next slide, please. And so overall, from a Pasadena perspective, ownership of property is on the decline. It is slow, it is on a slow decline, and it is well below the national average. So in 2010, it was at 45%. You see it's decreased down to 42% over the last 10 years. The national average for ownership is 64.1%. Danny, can you click a couple times, please? 3 times. Now, from a Pasadena perspective, there are about 55,000 units, residential units across all of Pasadena. Of those, you're seeing the breakdown across all ethnicities and where that 42% number comes from. Can you click 3 times, please, Danny? Okay, and then the next thing we needed to look at and wanted to understand is how do we as Black Pasadena fit into this picture? And what you will note here is Black Pasadena is sitting at about 29.5% home ownership rate. And so there are many reasons for that. And it also helps us to understand why the median age in Black Pasadena is higher than the median age of Pasadena. Pasadena itself is an older community with older residents. It's hard to get in to the market here. But within there, the question becomes, how am I going to get into this market? Historically, Pasadena, Black Pasadena had a couple of things that counted against it. The first one is the GI Bill, where the applications and the funding were basically stacked against us succeeding. You had redlining that was also taking place where different things were happening to make sure that we were not able to buy outside of certain areas. Ergo, why you have a lot of Black concentration over in Northwest Pasadena. But then as we concentrated in different areas, they started building highways. And in Pasadena, like in many other parts of the country, the highways of this country went through our neighborhoods. And that into eminent domain took the property, and that has impacted our wealth. So at the end of the presentation, as we look at what can we do about this? What is the call to action? One of the big things is, if you can afford to rent in Pasadena, and we looked at the income, we do have people that are making over that 122,000 number. If you can afford rent in Pasadena, you can afford a mortgage in Pasadena. But we need to overcome the barrier to entry, which is the down payment. So towards the end of the presentation, we will provide links and information on organizations that you can work with in order to help overcome that barrier. Danny, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
I'm next going to talk about education and its impact on income and the consequences of that, how it impacts housing, as Elise was just so eloquently outlining, and some of the other ramifications of that. And so our first education slide shows something that should be no surprise to anyone. And what this chart highlights is annualized income based on education levels. Quickly moving from left to right, those with less than a high school diploma, they make on average 32,000 plus a year. And skipping ahead to the end, and it's a predictable journey for up to high school degree, some college, an associate degree, a bachelor's degree, and then all the way to a graduate degree, making almost 3 times as much as those with less than a high school degree.
Got it.
Yes? Someone asking something? Oh, okay. Anyway, those with a graduate degree make $92,000 plus a year, almost 3 times as much as those who have less than a high school degree. That probably is expected, that kind of proportion, but here are some numbers to bring those realities and those expectations to life. It's quantifying it. Next, we look at Pasadena educational attainment by race. And as you can see, Black students in Pasadena are graduating from high school at close to the rates of their ethnic counterparts at the 90% range. The big differential that's unfortunate is the Black college graduation rate is only 35% of those have a college degree or bachelor's degree. And that disparity is greater than some of the other ethnic groups. And that has obvious ramifications or predictable ramifications for income levels, as we were seeing on the previous slide, and consequently home ownership, among other things, in Pasadena. We next look at Pasadena City College degrees, and to highlight a particular point. And that is, we see the largest share of majors being liberal arts and sciences, and the 3rd largest or 4th largest being humanistic studies. And what I want to highlight here without judgment is just a reality in 2022. And that is technology is impacting our lives, how we live, work, and play. And compensation reflects that. And so we want to make people aware, students or young people aware, to consider as they're looking at majors and looking to the future from 2022 forward, to consider more of the STEAM field, science, technology, engineering, arts, and math, for the jobs of the future that tend to be well-paying. And so again, not to disparage or demean, but students need to be mindful if they're going to major in a field like, or a subject like English, what will they do with that degree? What type of well-paying job will they be able to find with that? And so we just want to highlight that to make sure students are aware. Next, we look at something that shows Los Angeles metro area hourly wages. And again, that path or distribution is somewhat predictable. The more technical, the more higher education requiring fields pay a lot more. You see management at $67 an hour, legal fields close to it at $66 an hour, and then some of the other more technical, more specialized degree requiring fields at those high hourly rates. And then again, not to disparage, but some of the areas or fields that tend to be more manual labor oriented and less highly skilled or degree requiring tend to be in those lower levels at less than $20 an hour. Another consideration or something that is highlighting or showing how that educational levels and specialized fields are much higher paying. Next, this is the start of highlighting and expanding our definition and notion of education. When we tend to talk about education, we think of a traditional or highly touted pathway of going to college. But what we want to encourage everyone to think about is education in a more broad sense. And that is thinking about education in that college pathway as well as a more vocational pathway. And that is, there are many fields and arenas where someone can earn a healthy living, a healthy wage without having a college degree. And we want people to be aware of some of these options. And this slide highlights some of those, the annual pay for fields like electrician or plumbing, or then you look at things like nursing and technical certificates, which we will get to more with the next slide. And I want to highlight something that is very topical and local, and that is that there are opportunities in the city of Pasadena for general laborers on construction projects where they are making $37 an hour, and that translates to $75,000 to $76,000 per year in annualized income. And there are opportunities, and anyone who's interested in opportunities in construction, general laborers, contact the Pasadena NAACP office. This is now, this is here, and those are certainly some healthy salaries, $37 an hour for general laborers in construction. Continuing the mention about certificates, there are a number of technical certificates that are the pathway and lead to some very well-paying jobs. These are in arenas, you see the references toward the bottom to Microsoft. These are the types of certificates that can be the entry point to jobs with Google and other technical companies that I alluded to earlier that are determining the way we live, work, and play. Additionally, some of these certificates can be obtained in a period as short as 6 to 9 months. Others can take longer, a year to 2 years. But these are pathways that are alternatives to the traditional college route. And as you can see with these numbers on this page that get to as high as $175,000 a year, and going back to what Elise was discussing with housing, that those kind of salaries on this page would enable someone to purchase a median priced home in Pasadena. So this can be an alternative pathway to college and an alternative pathway to being able to live and afford to live in Pasadena. Next, we turn to the African American Parent Council, and John will discuss what they are doing and the good trouble they are raising and highlighting and bringing to the public's attention.
Thank you so much, Danny. I appreciate it. So yeah, my name is John Lynch, and I'm on the executive board of the African American Parent Council. Excited to be here with you tonight, and we'll talk a little bit more about what we're about, and like Danny said, some of the good trouble that we're engaged in. We'll go to the next slide, please. So the African American Parent Council, our bread and butter is to really mobilize the community and engage stakeholders to transform the system, the school system, to ensure the high quality education for every student. But I mean, to be honest, right, Black students are really our business, right? That's our focus. We have a a lot of different programs that we put on, including the Black History Living Museum, which is an opportunity for young folks to really steep themselves in Black history and portray a famous African American in a kind of a living museum that we put on each year. So I hope that you all can be part of that as well. Next slide, please. Sorry. We also want to just take a second to recognize Black excellence, right? So in the middle of a pandemic, the class of 2021, our last graduating class, 5 of the 6 schools in PUSD had Black valedictorians. And that to us is important. I think it's really important when we think about this nexus between, that Danny showed us, between educational outcomes, educational attainment, and economic success, right? Your ability to not only to be born and to live in Pasadena, but to do well enough to stay in Pasadena, right? We want our young people to be able to stay here and live robust lives. So we do want to recognize Black excellence. Next slide. But we'd also be, I don't know, asleep, right? If we also weren't ready to recognize Black disproportionality in our schools, right? So in June 2020, middle of the pandemic, middle of kind of everyone, I think, not everyone, but much of the country waking up to racial injustice, right? Our board in PUSD unanimously approved a resolution called 2566, and it was entitled PUSD's Commitment to Black Students. And in there, it was almost like a recommitment, right? And it talked about some of the places where Black students weren't doing as well, right? Black students were over-identified for disciplinary measures, and Black students were over-identified for special education. And Black students are also under-identified as in GATE and honors classes and AP classes, right? One thing we want to talk about today, and something that's important to us, is this issue around Black disproportionality in school discipline and school suspensions, because we think that actually is a real barrier to the Pasadena dream. Next slide, please. So you'll see that in 2017 and 18, Black students made up about 12% of the student population in PUSD, but overall made up 37% of the overall suspension. So more than a third, close to 40%, right? And in some of the earlier grades, we look at like 1st, 2nd, or 3rd grade. You can kind of see from left to right that in some of those grades make up close to 50% of the suspensions in some of the earliest grades. Again, opportunities in school, we feel like, and we're very committed public school parents, right? I think we're some of the public schools, Pasadena's fiercest advocates, right? And hardest defenders in many ways. But we also want to make sure that we're not asleep, right? And that we're looking at data and we're trying to eliminate barriers that get in the way of our students doing as well as they possibly can and live in that Pasadena dream. That's the next paragraph. Next slide, please. That was 2017 and 18. Now 2018-19. When you look at suspension data from the California Department of Education, it shows that Black students in Pasadena Unified were 10 times more likely to be suspended than Asian students, 5 times more likely to be suspended than white students, and 2 times more likely to be suspended than Latinx students. Again, for us, this is gross disproportionality, right? And these are the types of things that put our students, Black students, at a disadvantage in terms of doing well in school. And if we know, again, back to what Danny says, right? The better you do in school, the better your life outcomes will be, right? And we want to make sure our kids have strong life outcomes. Next slide, please. Some of the research, really profound, nationally recognized researchers at UCLA put out a recent report from the UCLA Center for the Transformation of Schools. It's called Beyond the Schoolhouse, and PUSD is identified actually as being 2nd in the county in terms of Black suspensions. Antelope Valley is number 1, with a Black student suspension rate that is more than double the overall rate. Sorry, I got the chat threw me off for a second. Overall rate for Black suspensions in LA County, meaning that if you're a Black student in Pasadena Unified, you're actually twice as likely as your average Black student in the county to be suspended. And that's not okay. That's not okay with us, right? That's not okay with us. Next slide, please. And the district, the district has taken measures to get better about keeping young people in schools, right? And finding ways, alternative discipline measures and policy shifts that has lowered suspensions over time. And so you'll see at the bottom axis, the X, moving from left to right, you'll see that that data starts in 2011, 2012 and moves to 2018, 19. And you'll see the suspensions overall have declined for every group, every subgroup. And overall they've declined. But that disproportionality, that red bar up top, the Black student suspensions, it is as disproportionate as it's ever been, right? And so these are places where we have to continue to push, because we know that disproportionate suspension leads to disproportionate outcomes. Next slide, please. And so this is, we don't engage in these conversations or show this data or push, and we'll talk more about our push as just like activity, right? We know that suspensions have actual negative consequences for our youth, both in their schooling and in their lives, right? And research has showed us that young people who are suspended once, are suspended twice, suspended 3 times, suspended 5 times, right? That young folks who have out of school suspensions lose instructional time, right? That they don't get that face time with their teachers, they don't get to turn and talk with their peers, right? And then they fall behind in their coursework. And we know that when students fall behind their coursework in high school, they don't accumulate the credits that they need, they often fall behind and they often don't graduate, right? They're dropped out or they're pushed out. And then we know that folks who are dropped out or pushed out, as Danny showed us, not only do they make a less wage than folks who go on to matriculate and graduate, but they also oftentimes enter the school to prison pipeline. Can you do one more click for me, Danny? So I guess our question is, when we think about the Pasadena dream, right? And we think about the aspirations that we have for our young folks to own a house, to own a car, to get married, to go on vacation, to be activists in the community, to live healthy lives. How will our kids grow to their fullest potential when they are disproportionately pushed out of our schools? Can we have a next slide, please? So a bit of the timeline that we wanted just to tell you some of the good trouble, right? So we established a committee to end racially biased discretionary suspensions in PUSD. We feel like if the disproportionality has been going on since 2011, and if you looked at data, it's probably been going on since 1991. It's probably been going on since 1971. We have a complicated history with public schooling in this city, and I think many people on this phone call, this is not something you don't know. We don't think that this is something that can be tinkered with. Right? I think the tinkering is not going to get us anywhere. The tinkering is going to get us sloping down like this, right? But always this top bar and not this bottom bar. So we're looking for more than tinkering. So we've been consulting with some of our colleagues in Oakland who have Chris Chapman, who started the African American Male Achievement Initiative in Oakland, community organizers in LA, down here for really guidance around how are we going to get a win like this, right? We met with our assistant superintendent, and it was just kind of more about tinkering, right? So we asked for a meeting with the superintendent, and we met with him in January, and we felt like it was a strong meeting, and we actually have a meeting with him next week as well as a follow-up. And he's looking to create a task force that would actually put together a policy that would go to the board. And we're hoping that we can push for this to move forward. Potentially by the start of this school year, right? But this is not going to be easy work, because this is a really systems change work, right? But this is that good trouble that we talk about, and this is what's right for our kids, right? And this is the type of thing that's going to put our kids in the place, right? When they've dropped, when our Black population, I did the math, the Black population looks like it's dropped 40% since 2000, right? And we know that our young people need to be put in an opportunity to be gainfully employed, to have the job that they want, to make the money that they need to live in our city, right? Pasadena needs to feel like a robust Black city moving forward, and we know that education plays a big role in that. Can we get the next slide, please? So we're going to talk about a call to action, and we'll talk about ours first, and then I'll pass it over to other folks to talk about some other pieces of the work. But if I can get the next slide. So I think if you're interested in the work that we're doing, the good trouble that we're getting into, here's a couple of things that you can do. You can email PUSD Superintendent Dr. McDonald or your school board member or any school board member, and let them know that you stand with us in any discretionary suspensions. We know that they're disproportionate. We know the suspensions actually have material issues, material outcomes that impact the lives of our students, both in the classroom, right, on the graduation stage, and in their lives. We also know that there are people on this call who have impact stories, right? Who've kind of had a life impacted by disproportionate school discipline. And if you know your nephew or your cousin or your mom or yourself would be willing to share an impact story around that with us, that'd be great, because we would love to have a presentation going to the PUSD school board that includes stories from Black Pasadena. The last thing that I could come up with that you can do, but if you have thoughts, we'd love to hear that too. We have a next AAPC meeting coming up on March 1st, and we'd love for you to come, right, and deepen your understanding of disproportionality in school discipline in PUSD and beyond. We'll have Dr. Luke Wood from San Diego State coming to talk about disproportionate suspensions and the impact it has on students in the early grades. And we'll also have, I think he's an NAACP board member actually, Dominic Corey, who's from Pasadena and took the road less traveled, partially because of disproportionate school discipline, and has made it to the other side. And so if you're interested in what we talked about today and you want to become more involved, please reach out to us. We'd love to connect. And yeah, thank you for your time. And I'll pass it on to Danny to talk about other ways that you can be involved in the work we talked about today.
Hello again, and before I shift, I'm going to go off script very quickly. And John, I just thank you for your presentation, and I want to echo with 2 quick points to what you were saying. I went to Pasadena Public Schools. I was in 7th grade when Pasadena started busing for desegregation in 1970. I attended Wilson Junior High School from 70 to 72, which was 25% Black. I attended Muir High School from 72 to 76, which was 50% Black. And there was extreme disproportionality in suspensions back then. And there was a tracking of Black students away from the gifted college track. And my parents had to intervene at Wilson and at Muir to ensure that I remained on the gifted college track. The point being, this is nothing new. I can attest to a 50+ year history of nonsense, and Alan is even more seasoned and could take it back a little farther. So John, thank you for what you're doing. It's nothing new, but it is something that is overdue to change. So what I'm going to talk about is another bit of a call to action, and that's about recycling dollars. And the importance of recycling dollars is this: when dollars recycle within a community or a sub-community, those recycled dollars create wealth, or the accumulation of wealth, and they create jobs. So what does that mean? What it means is recycling Black dollars in the Black community. Someone Black receives a paycheck. They spend dollars at a Black-owned restaurant. They spend dollars at a Black-owned beauty shop or barber shop or a retailer, be it a cleaners or any other thing. And then in turn, those vendors, those shopkeepers, those retailers also spend dollars at other Black-owned businesses. As those dollars recirculate and recycle within a community, again, that creates jobs, that creates wealth and affluence. Unfortunately, the facts are dismal and as follows. A dollar recycles or recirculates one time in the Black community, 7 times in the overall community, and that leads to some unfortunate predictable consequences in terms of the wealth and overall well-being of the Black community, or the opposite if the case may be. So we want to highlight briefly 3 opportunities to support Black vendors in sort of 3 aspects of everyone's life. First, household spending. So someone who's a homeowner, or you don't have to be a homeowner, but you have spending connected to wherever you live. It's higher for homeowners, but even if you're an apartment dweller, you can dictate some of your spending. So if you have a plumbing problem or electrical problem, consider using Black plumbers, Black electricians. If you are hiring someone to work on your yard, consider patronizing a Black gardener. Additionally, consider patronizing Black-owned stores or retailers in whatever shopping you may choose to do. And to whatever extent that, in addition to that, consider patronizing places that hire Black employees, that extend employment opportunities to all segments of our local community. It makes no sense to shop at a place that would not hire you. That's just basic bottom line. Let's not get it twisted. Second place of potential spending that you may be able to impact or direct is at your respective workplaces. If you have input or control in terms of identifying and encouraging vendors, whether it's an RFP, whether it's a formal process for selecting an outside vendor, or an informal process that you can intervene, interject, and make suggestions, consider doing that so that your workplace is considering Black vendors for opportunities to do business with your respective employer. Even better, if you own your own business, you have absolute control over which vendors you utilize. Lastly, you have volunteer activities, be it Greek organizations, social organizations, nonprofits that where you may be a board member, volunteer, church, or other. And again, in that spending, if you have control or input, once again, consider, if not insist on utilization of Black vendors. And it's important to think of it from this standpoint. Not only does it benefit the Black community, but it creates a rising tide for the overall community. The overall economic health of all aspects of our community matter. And we all spend dollars at various vendors, and those dollars, as they recirculate within the Black community and the overall community, creates a rising tide of increased economic opportunity and general well-being for everyone. Lastly, the bottom slot is just showing Black consumer annual spending in 2020 and showing some of the aspects or segments or sectors where spending occurs. Some of those, there's greater discretion in terms of pinpointing or considering the opportunities or possibilities for utilizing Black vendors. But wherever it may be, can be, it should be to consider Black vendors. And lastly, before turning it over to Elise, I want to make one more off-topic mention very briefly. And that is, Elise was talking earlier about the areas of the city of Pasadena where Black folks live. Consider this, we did not arrive at 2022 in a vacuum. There is an unfortunate history that Pasadena is doing better now, but we can't forget the past that brought us to today. Once upon a time, the boundaries for the Black population in Pasadena in the 1930s, there were no Blacks north of Washington Boulevard. There were no Blacks east of Fair Oaks, and there was a Black community south of Colorado Boulevard. There is only one remnant remaining of that Black community south of Colorado Boulevard, and that is Friendship Baptist Church. And if you wonder what happened to that Black community south of Colorado Boulevard, consider this. The 710 freeway bisected and decimated that Black community. That Black community had a southern boundary of California Boulevard. That's where the 710 stub, not so coincidentally, ends. Ambassador College expanded on both sides, the west and east side of that 710 stub. So there is an unfortunate history that brought us to today, and we need to be informed so we have some inspiration and some guidance for how we do better tomorrow. So next, Elise, with me going off script, and for that I apologize, but I don't have good sense. Elise is now going to take us back on script and tell you something good.
Danny, thank you. We deeply all appreciate that history that you were able to share. And if you didn't go off script, you would not be Danny. So thank you. So, what I want to highlight now is the NAACP Pasadena Good Trouble Alliance. We are a group that consists of a variety of different organizations. You saw the sponsors on the front slide. And the purpose of this organization really is to try to raise our voice under the auspices and umbrella of the NAACP. We may be small, but together we are mighty. And so different organizations have come together. We have identified different areas that we need to focus on, we need to attack, and that we need to make sure we as a people are having a voice that unites us, and we are communicating, and we are being loud. And so some of the things that we have done thus far since we started a couple years ago, trying to figure out what we were going to do and who we are. We focused on driving and making sure that the Pasadena Police Oversight Commission was put in place. You may remember, as we all know, we still have concerns around Anthony McLean, but the Oversight Commission was supposed to have been put in place 5 years earlier, but it fell by the wayside. We helped make sure that that public comment was made, focus was put on this, and this commission was indeed put in place. And with that, we also have 2 members from the community organizations that come from organizations of the Pasadena Good Trouble Alliance. So we made sure it happened, and we also made sure we applied, so we have a voice in the room. Too often decisions are being made and we are not in the room to impact decisions that impact us. And that is one of the things that we are trying to make sure changes. Through everything we did with the Oversight Commission, we were able to bring light to other candidates from our organizations, and we had representation on the Pasadena Redistricting Committee, and our voices were heard. And then as you look at how the redistricting came out, the voices that we had in the room that were heard influenced decisions that meant we were not disadvantaged. As we looked at the California redistricting that took place last year, we studied the maps. We followed everything, and we had concerns with the district map, with the congressional district map, where they were trying to separate Pasadena and Altadena. And we did not want that to happen because that would have diluted the Black voice within the Valley. So we drove a campaign then to get that changed, as well as when we looked at the assembly member district, they were trying to take our assembly member and have that assembly member go all the way out to Lake Arrowhead. Very different communities, very diverse communities, very far communities. That would have impacted the service that our assembly member could have done for us. So we raised voices, maps were changed. From a home ownership perspective, we ran a series last year. Some of you were here from that series last year. I hope you enjoyed it. And but that came about when we look around the community and we're looking at, we're losing us and we're losing us, and we have to get control. But one thing that we historically tend to do is try to show up on the day of, when we didn't do the things we needed to do to get ready for the opportunities. And so that series was focused on getting people ready to be ready at the right time. And with that, we are continuing forward based on the feedback we got from that series with this year's workshops, which are entitled Get Your Money Right, Build Your Black Wealth. This State of Black Pasadena is the first workshop in that series. The dates and the other workshops that will be in the series, Alan will talk about before he closes out. So the question becomes, how can you support? First of all, be loud, be loud, and be loud. Attend the workshop series, share the information out, encourage people to come. If we're going to bend the curve, we have to understand money. Many times we are first generation of having money, and we may not understand how to do the things we need to do with the money. And it is not putting it on our backs or driving it down the street. Spread the word on all activities. And when we put out information for a campaign, we will provide information that says, this is the issue. This is these are comments you can make. This is where you go to make your comments. We're going to ask you to please go make comments. And we're going to ask you to be loud and communicate in the community, because we're trying to make sure our voices are raised so we can be small, but we can be mighty. And if you're interested in joining PGTA or AAPC, just send an email, reach out. We would love to have you, because we are organizations and concerned members of the community. And that's what makes up the Pasadena Good Trouble Alliance. I'm now going to turn this over to Alan, who will talk about an opportunity for us to get loud that we anticipate in the near future. Alan, take it away.
Thank you, Elise. This has been a real powerful and strong presentation. And I want to thank all the participants, on the ones that are here learning, and the Good Trouble Alliance. We're in I think, a real exciting period of time. Last week we had a meeting where there was overwhelming support to see Cheryl Moody become the police chief of the city of Pasadena. But in order for that to happen, there's got to be a selection of a new city manager. And this is, I think, an opportunity for us to provide input, but also learn about how the city manager's selection process is going to take place. And so I've spoken with the interim city manager, and she's willing to provide a presentation to the Good Trouble and also the NAACP members. And so when we get to a date to make that happen, you all will be advised. I think everybody that's registered for this event today will get an invitation. The other thing I want to put a shout out to is for the continued Build Your Black Wealth series. I want to thank Westcom Credit Union and Foundation for partnering with us to provide this workshop. As you learned today, everything is connected, from education and how our students are being denied education by being suspended. Also, how our income can provide us stability here in Pasadena. And if we get the right salaries, we can afford to live and own houses here in Pasadena. And as we go up, if we're stable, our population will also be stable. And of course, all this takes engagement from every single one of us. We all have a contribution that we can make to seeing the Pasadena that we want to live and play in. And so I encourage you all to become involved in Good Trouble Alliance, most definitely the AAPC. They've got challenges that we all need to be part of, because our young people are our future. Along with the presentation, we have some add-ons about some nonprofits that provide services for housing. There's a list there on the screen, from Habitat to Humanity, Heritage Housing Partners, and the City of Pasadena's Housing Department. And then, of course, you'll learn that Westcom provides some, I believe, fair rates on home mortgages. And then the other thing, we have a page that is our, I guess, bibliography for where we got all the data for tonight's presentation. And so with that, if you've got questions, please put them in the chat. And we'll take the questions as they come.
Alan, thank you. We do have some questions that have come in. So one question that has come in, I'm going to direct this to you, John, and possibly Mia. Does AAPC have a person present at all suspension hearings involving Black students with parental consent?
So we
I-
don't.
Oh, I can take that for you, John, if you want.
Sure.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Nia, and I'm the chair of the district AAPC. That is not, I appreciate that question, but our focus and approach has really been more around eliminating this tool altogether and bringing in a replacement. So that's been our primary focus. On the district level, we do attend the meetings that have to do with child welfare and attendance. And we were successful in our work with Michelle Bailey in getting this issue as a standing item on their agenda for those meetings. But as far as having someone come in, a representative from our group come into each of the hearings, we have not taken that approach. And I empathize with everyone who's been impacted. My own children have been impacted. So my thing is we need to get rid of this altogether for the betterment of our children altogether. So this has really, really been the primary level of our focus. And our organization is always available to parents, to resource parents, to stand with parents, and all of that. That is why we do what we do. But that has been the more of our focus right now, and where we really need support is this is not even something they can do. So for discretionary suspensions, we want that off the table as even an option that our schools can use. And what that language might seem confusing to some. So what I would just say about what is a discretionary suspension, that is everything that they're not legally obligated to suspend for. And you can find that information on education websites for the state of California on what are the legal reasons that you have to suspend or expel. So everything outside of that is discretionary. And I think we've all heard of the terms willful suspensions and things like that. So that is what we're trying to get rid of. So no, we don't have someone at this time attending that, but attending meetings per school site, but we do appreciate that question. Thank you.
Thank you, Nia. Okay, I'm going to move to the next question. And just so everyone knows, this presentation will be emailed out to everyone that has registered for this event. Alan, this next question is for you. Will the
Okay,
virtual meeting with the meeting with the interim city manager be a virtual meeting?
it will be virtual unless conditions change where we can meet as a group.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the next question is, will there be a topic on how to actually break into the housing market, especially when the dollars aren't where they need to be? What we will have is a presentation on home ownership, the steps required, what's going to be needed. We will also probably reach out and invite Heritage Housing Partners to join us. Lynette doesn't know that yet, so I'm going to let you know in advance. I'll be contacting you. And then we're also providing resources in this presentation that will be, that can help you to overcome the obstacle of getting or obtaining the down payment. So those tend to be the big barriers to entry. And through the first presentations that will start to take place, and each presentation will be on the 4th Wednesday of the month, we will also be looking at 10 steps to financial success and understanding credit. So we'll start with the basics and then build from there. There are two questions in here, and Alan, I'm going to throw this one at you because I think you're going to be our best source for this. The question is around having access to a list of Black craftsmen, such as plumbers, electricians, etc. Is something like that available via the NAACP? If yes, how can we gain access to it?
I'm happy you ask. Actually, we've developed a Black business directory. I don't know how many plumbers or electricians are in it, but it's for the use of all of you. And you can go online to Lolo, that's LOLOVIVI, LOLOVV.com. And you'll see a pretty well populated list of Black owned businesses, not only here in Pasadena, but also LA and San Gabriel Valley.
Okay, so with that, I'll make sure I add a page into the presentation that has that information before I email it out.
And just for a filler, Lolo Vivi means there's always love.
Okay, thank you for that, Alan. Okay, so there's a comment here around, I think at some point we should also talk about maintaining Black wealth. That may mean trust and wills. I've seen so many times here in Pasadena where, oh, hold on, I lost my question. Where homes were left to children who were not able to keep the property. The property or estate was lost because we did not know how to manage the newfound property wealth. Okay, so we are planning to do investing 101, and then we're planning to do advanced investing. And we'll be talking about some of those topics in that particular class. Because one of the big problems is we may build some wealth, and we've looked at the increase in value in properties where a lot of people actually have all their wealth tied into the actual property. So there's two things taking place. One is children not being able to take care of the home and keeping it. And then the other is the home is the nest egg for retirement for the parents. So they sell it, take the money out, and move out to other places. And those tend to be the two things that are driving the decrease in two of the things that are driving decrease in Black population. Okay. Has there been any discussion around the area of emotional intelligence and helping children navigate their emotions? I think this is a Nia and our John question.
Yeah, I can jump in here. I appreciate that question so much, right? I think what it alludes to really is this idea that like that's what schools are meant to do, right? I mean, schools don't just teach you about geometry and chemistry and how to run a mile and dress out for PE, but they also teach you like how to navigate conflict, right? How to be your best self when days are hard, and how to navigate trauma, right? And so I think embedded in that question is this idea that schools should and need to play all those roles, and that's what we believe in strongly. We believe in opportunities and initiatives like restorative justice, right? This idea that like, you know, people have conflict. I mean, we all have conflict with people in our lives, right? And we owe it to our young people in a situation that's safe as a school for them to take risks and to understand like this is how you navigate conflict in a way that's professional and transparent and honest and so you don't have to make those mistakes on the street, or you don't have to make those mistakes again. And then hopefully those things go back and impact the way you engage with your mom or your significant other, right? Or your friends when things get tough. So restorative justice for us is a great opportunity, and we think it's a research evidence practice around how to do alternatives to suspensions in ways that are really steeped in the whole child. And so there, you know, if you come to here's a pitch. If you come to the AAPC meeting on March 1st, you'll hear about some restorative justice work that we're kicking off at Pasadena High School that I think is really has an opportunity to be transformative, not just for Bulldogs in the city, but for many of our city kids. So make it out on the 1st, and but just know that restorative justice is something that we're pushing as a replacement to suspensions. I think we can use it to navigate a whole lot of things for our young people.
Okay, thank you, John. Okay, Luis has dropped something into the chat, and I think we'll make sure that it does also will get addressed. But Luis, thank you for sharing. What she is sharing is, I hope it is noted in this wealth presentation, the California laws have changed, which allows the property taxes to stay at the lower rates for home purchased a while ago, and children can move into those homes that may be paid off and have very low property taxes and no mortgage. Let's say the parents die. So this gets into wealth management, wealth protection. And so this falls directly back into some of the things that we need to understand and the vehicles we need to leverage and utilize. Okay, Alan has placed in the chat the website for the Black Business Directory for anyone that did not catch that. And I will make sure that we add this in to the presentation on a slide, like I mentioned before we send it out. We are approaching the bottom of the hour, and I do not see any more questions. So I am now going to turn this over to you, Alan, so you can take us out. Thank you.
Wow, thank you. Well, this was great. I hope you all benefited from tonight's presentation and figured out a way on how to become engaged in our community. With that engagement, we can topple the highest mountain, and we can do it well. And so if you're not members of the Pasadena branch of NAACP, now's your invitation. You can become a member online at naacppasadena.org, or you can come to the office and fill out a membership form. If you need any other information, our office is open every day. Somebody's here to help. And so again, I want to thank Elise, Danny, Patrice, John, and Nia for their contributions for tonight's event. And all I can say is God bless you all. And we'll see you next time.
Okay, and Alan, Danny, can you please advance the slide before we close out? Danny? Okay, so here is the workshop training series. And so we are going to really try to do something. We'll do investing basics, and then we're going to try to really do something that really picks up more on what to do with your money and how to have your money work and grow for you. It's like I joke about it, but I'm very serious about it. I go to work and my money goes to work. I need my money going to work too, every day. So that's something that we always need to be thinking about. And then the next slide. So if anyone is interested in digging deeper, we really tried to package everything down into small bits and bytes, but we are providing you sources and resources. So if anyone is interested in going deeper yourselves, you will be able to do that. As I mentioned, we have 2 basic locations for access to Black businesses, and both are in the chat. We will add them both into this presentation before it is sent out. Thank you again for joining us this evening. We deeply appreciate you. We will be sending out information on the next presentation in the near future. Have a wonderful evening.
Good night.
Thank you very much. Thank you.